Hello and what's up, political peeps? Per usual, I'm your host, Arif Kapoor, and today it is November 13th, 2024, approximately 5 p.m. Eastern Time, and I am joined by Mr. Alexander Majewski from Mr. TC. Mr. TC Gamer will be linked in the description below, his YouTube channel, and he's Ukrainian, and his grandmother had experienced some atrocities during the Holocaust, and I'm here to shed light on what happened to her and more about her story. So, Alexander, welcome to the Geopolitical.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I'm looking forward to telling the story of my great grandmother.
Yes, we're super excited to hear what you have to say and find out more about your grandmother Tasa Zubek. But before we get into that, thank you so much for tuning in today. If you are on the live, you leave comments below with any questions you have for Alexander to hear more about his grandmother's story, or myself, of course, if you have any other questions concerning the Holocaust or anything else, read over here. And then this will also be posted on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, etc. After the live stream is over, just so you can listen on audio platforms as well. So, Alexander, your grandmother was Tasa Zubek. She was born before the Holocaust, and then she experienced some things during the Holocaust. So, can you start by telling us more about your connection to your grandmother and a preliminary overview of what happened to her?
Yes, so she is my grandmother on my mom's side, mother. So she is my mother's mother's mother. Um, she was born in Ukraine, a small village called Latava. Um, she was taken by the Nazis and brought to multiple camps in Germany. And then she was freed by a famous U.S. general, and I forgot his name. I have it here, but uh, she was freed, and she met her husband Gradimir. They had their first two kids in Europe that they came to America, and had um, they had four other children, four other boys, and she lived out the rest of her life in the same house for 72 years, where she passed away last May on the 23rd, 2024, um, in a hospital. And yeah, she had an amazing life, despite the hardships that she went through as a child.
Yeah, definitely. But can you tell us how old was Atasa when she was taken by the Nazis?
She was only 15 years old.
So she was 15. And can you tell us more, if you know, about how she felt when her camp was liberated?
She had said to the generals that she will like owe her life to those people. I have the quote somewhere, uh, but I forgot where it went. But it was something along the lines of, "You people freed me, and I owe my life to you, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart." Something like that. Yes.
So after Tasa was freed from the camp and kind of was around Europe for a while, like you mentioned, what prompted her to come to the United States?
So church in the town that she moved to, Mansfield, or the general area that she moved to, Mansfield, Pennsylvania, they have a Baptist church, and that church sponsored her and her family to come to the U.S. And would give them an apartment and things like that in exchange for her husband, Gradimir, who was a tailor, to start a tailor shop to make and fix clothes and things like that.
Oh, okay, so that drove her to the United States. Now, can you tell me more about what your connection to your great grandmother was and what she meant to you?
She was very, very kind. She was funny. In her later years, majority of the time that I knew her, she had dementia, which was very hard on my family. She would forget our names, and she like forgot that we were family and stuff like that. But she still knew who we were, and she still loved us, even though she didn't quite know who we were.
Yeah, so I'm sorry you had to deal with that. But now I want to transition from this, talk more about what you know particularly about her time in the camp system. Do you know any of the specific camps that she went through?
So we know one. We don't know the exact like name, location, all that stuff, but it was called the Temple Health. However, when me and my family looked it up, we found that it was just an airport in the middle of Germany, and was actually no camp called Temple Health. But turned out that it was called the Columbia House, which was a camp that they had used during the Holocaust, which was also in Berlin. That was, I believe, the first camp that they sent her to, and we do not know the names of the other ones.
And do you know anything about how the experiences that she witnessed when she was um in the camp system?
So she had mostly bad ones, but there were a few like good encounters. One bad one was one time she was ill, and the soldiers had to send in the dogs, presumably German shepherds, and to tell her get out of bed or the dogs will attack you. So even though she was very ill and she barely could get out of bed, she had to get out of bed and work, even
So
though
what kind of
she
things was
couldn't.
she being forced to do in that work?
She would make bombs, clean up messes, work farms, animals, and she mostly would be making bombs. She always told stories of how she used to drill the holes in the bombs when they came by on the conveyor belt, and then it would go on to the next person to start putting the nails in. So that's the story that she always told us.
And by the way, thank you so much to Finals Legend 228. I really appreciate you joining, kind of, and helping us shine this light on the sad event. But it's really important that Tasa Zubek's story is told. So thank you to Finals Legend 228 and Alexander for being here. Alexander, I want to talk more about Tasa's time there in the camps, just as we were before. Um, do you know specifically? You mentioned there was a good thing in that story that you were about to mention.
Yes, so there was a soldier, a
Mhm.
female soldier. Her name was Emma. My cousin, one of her other great grandchildren, was named after her. The soldier. She would take pieces of her sandwiches that she brought every day for lunch, and she would take off pieces and she would give them to the girls, her and the other girls in her barrack, and they would have extra food. And she credits her for allowing her to survive, while other barracks didn't get extra food, and a lot of them passed away from malnourishment.
And can you describe the experience? Because ultimately in Ukraine, with the Nazis were occupying those areas, people knew what was going on and they knew what bad things were happening. But how was the experience getting taken away from her home and her family? And what happened to her, Tassa's parents?
So it was a family of five. It was her younger sister, her older brother, and her two parents. Um, Her older brother was drafted into the Soviet Red Army to help invade Poland and take half of Poland, which is what happened in the Second World War, before Germany invaded the Soviet Union. But her and her sister were living in the house, and when Germany came and took over Ukraine, they went around to the many villages around, and they took her, and they took other girls her age, a few of her friends, and put them in boxcars, sent them to Germany. Her father, um, he told the soldier, "Take me instead. I don't want my daughter to go to let her live her life." But he was too old, and he couldn't he wasn't eligible to go to the camp. So they only took her. Her sister was left behind because she was too young. She was 12, 13 at the time. That was too young to bring to the camp. Um, when she was taken, she never saw her parents again. But in 1993, she went back and was able to see her brother, who had survived the war with a few injuries, and her sister, who lived out the rest of her life in Ukraine and may still be alive. We do not know.
So, do you know anything about the sister? Have you ever was there ever an opportunity to reunite?
Yeah, as I said, in 1993, she and a few of her kids went to Ukraine, to Latava, the village. Um, it was all recorded, so it was all documented, so we know what happened. She got to be with her brother again and her sister again. Her sister, obviously, in Europe, they have a harsher life, especially in Ukraine, which had just been freed from the Soviet Union, so life was hard. She was in her 60s, mid 60s. Her sister was in her mid 60s, and she was still working the farms in Ukraine. So that was really tough life. So, but a few years ago, maybe 7 years ago, the last communication between Tasa and her sister was made, and but at that point they were both alive. They were both in their 90s. Or one was in Tasa was in her 90s. Her sister was in very late 80s.
Yeah, and what about the parents? You mentioned she never met her parents again. Why did she never have that opportunity? When was she released from the camp?
She was released from the camp, 1945, when she was immediately, because the American soldiers obviously spoke English and German, a little bit of German, and she spoke Ukrainian. They couldn't communicate. They didn't know, so they just brought her to a displaced persons camp, and there wasn't really anyone to get help. There was only moving forward, whether like you could be shipped back to your country where you had to find them on your own, which she couldn't do. She didn't know her way around the country. She had just been to Latava. She'd never been anywhere else. Or she could be sent to help, and they would either get sponsored or stay in Germany and like live their life there. So she never got to meet her parents. They passed away in the 50s or 60s, just of old age and whatever was happening there. They just passed away, and she never got to meet them. She was able to send letters back and forth with them a little bit for a few years, but that's it.
Oh, so she did make contact with them.
Yes, but very little. There's a huge box of letters when we were cleaning out her house that we found. I have no idea where those letters are, but they were all in Ukrainian, back and forth with her parents. But there were only like two letters that were addressed to the parents, and then the rest were addressed to the siblings.
Oh, so then, but did the parents write back?
We don't know, because every letter was addressed back as Maria, which was her little sister.
Mm. So we're not sure if it was written on behalf.
We don't. Yeah, it might be. We don't know.
Okay, so that's definitely extremely heartfelt, sad story. But is there anything else you want to add about Tasa's time in the camps?
No, not really. I feel like most of the big things were talked about. I know that when she was freed from the camp, yes. So it was on April 11th, 1945. Uh, Her husband was in the same camp she was, the final camp that she went to. Her husband Gradimir was also there. He was captured from Yugoslavia and was forced to tailor suits and jackets for the Nazi soldiers, for the higher ups in the camp. So that camp was freed by the General George Patton, who was a famous soldier. You can look him up. He has a lot of information on him. But she he led the group that freed that camp, and like she said, she owed her life to those soldiers who freed her, even though she didn't know them.
And can you elaborate more about your specific relationship to Tasa and your connection to her? Like what she meant to you as a person?
Yeah, so my great grandmother, she was the only great grandparent I had. Her second husband passed away a few months after I was born, and I never got to meet him. Um, so she was special to me in my younger years, up until I was maybe 7. She didn't have dementia, so she was always fun. She was active. She could still like walk and have like have fun, have conversations, like long conversations with you. And though I wasn't into things like history, I still liked to talk to her, and she liked to talk about the Second World War and she was just overall a really good person, though I didn't really get to know her in her life. Everyone in my family, even people who are not my family who she just knew, um, like said she was a really good person. She was a waitress at a restaurant called the Dixie Barbecue in Elmira, New York, and she was one of the favorite waitresses there. Everyone would wait on lines just to sit in the tables that she managed, and uh, all the other waiters, waitresses, they wouldn't get as much business as her. And she really cared. She would get the exact food first try that the people wanted. She would remember everyone's usuals and things like that. And it was, she was really caring, and she loved basically everyone.
That's very meaningful. And all that information that you just shared with us, was that all eyewitness accounts from Tasa?
Yeah, most of the information was either gotten from her or very like looked into through things like ancestry.com or archives.com by my uncle or aunt. They looked through it, or one of her kids would look through it, and they got a lot of information. And they probably have a lot more information that they haven't given me, which maybe would be a good thing for maybe a future episode if there's more information on the camp, maybe something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. You have more information. Shoot me a text. We'll do this again. But on that note, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you so much to all the
Yes.
viewers of this live stream, or if you're watching this after the fact. Really appreciate your support. Leave comments below. Make sure to like, follow, subscribe. Thank you so much for sharing your story, Alexander. You all know the drill. Peace out, political peeps.